Welcome to my family's favorite dinners. My name is Maria Delis and I'm a dietitian at Beyond Hunger and I love to cook. In this series I'm sharing with you all of my family's favorite dinners, and this is our favorite seafood dinner. We're making today some Panko roasted salmon and couscous with toasted pine nuts and roasted broccoli. So in these three recipes I'm going to show you some techniques that you're going to be learning that you can use for other recipes in the future. This recipe we love so much because it's a recipe that you can do on a busy weeknight day, and you can also make it for company. It's elegant enough for company, it looks good. Every time I've ever served this, I've always had reviews. And I can't take credit for this recipe. It is an Ina Garten recipe. She's one of my favorite TV chefs, and I have to admit I've learned a lot from her over the years, and I've used a lot of her recipes as well. So these two recipes, the Panko Crusted Salmon plus the couscous with the toasted pine nuts, comes from her. The roasted broccoli is just a basic roasted vegetable recipe that anybody could learn. This is a recipe that is really easy to memorize as well. And when I talked about my earlier recipe with the orecchiette and the Italian sausage, these are recipes that I have mostly memorized and can come together very quickly on a weeknight. And recipes that you can fall back on if you don't know what to make. So let's start off. Let's start off with making the panko topping for the salmon. We have panko breadcrumbs. So panko breadcrumbs are a Japanese type of breadcrumb that has a little bit of a thicker texture than plain American breadcrumbs. We're going to have some Dijon mustard and put that on the salmon, salt and pepper. We have some parsley. This is curly parsley, but you can use Italian parsley. We have some lemon zest and olive oil, and that's it. It's really, really easy. So let's start with the topping. The topping has about 2/3 cup of panko breadcrumbs. This is a recipe you cannot mess up. Often I don't even measure the ingredients for this recipe. I just pour it in a bowl like this and I just start adding the other ingredients to it. So don't be worried about sticking to the exact amounts that I tell you today. But this is about 2/3 cup of panko breadcrumbs. And then we're gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper. Again, this is to taste. After I finish my panko topping, I usually take a little spoon and I taste it to see that I'm happy with the salt and pepper. So I added a little bit of that. And then we're gonna add a little bit of the parsley. So parsley is a really nice ingredient to add to your cooking. It is very traditional in many parts of the world. It's wonderful as a topping, as a garnish, but it's also good to give color into different foods, especially in this topping where after we put it on top of the salmon, you're gonna see how beautifully green that looks. And it's something that I think that everybody will like. So basically I've taken, this is about a small bunch. We're gonna get about a few tablespoons out of this, and I've rinsed this under cold water, and we're going to chop this. So I just cut off the ends of the parsley, and if you have a compost, you can put it in your compost or just throw it in the trash. Don't worry if you have some of the stems. The stems are fine, they're edible. You don't need to throw them away or worry about picking off pieces of the parsley. So what I usually do is I like to try to roll it and kind of get it into a nice tight ball, and then I start cutting. And remember to make sure you're careful with your fingers. You kind of your finger that does not hold the knife, you have it kind of curled up so you don't cut your fingertips. And then the finger or the hand that's holding the knife, you want to try to keep your hand as close to the blade as possible for the best control. So what I do is after I do a rough chop like this, you want to try to get it finely chopped for this recipe. You don't want big pieces of the parsley in your panko topping. So I'm just going to go back and then finely chop the rest of this parsley. And then just throw it into the little bowl with the panko breadcrumbs. So this is looking really good. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is we're going to get some lemons. Zesting lemons and citrus is a great way to add flavor to your food. And what I always use to grate is a microplane zester. This is one of the best tools that a cook can have in the kitchen, and it can be used to grate cheeses and citrus fruits, the skins, nutmeg, other types of nuts. It's really, really easy to use. So we're gonna just grate a little bit of lemon zest on here. The recipe calls for about a teaspoon, and if you grate about the whole lemon, you can get about a teaspoon. So if you notice, what I'm doing is I'm grating and I'm turning the lemon as I grate, because I only want the outside part of the zest. You don't want to get any of the inside, the white part of the zest, because that's called the pith, and it's a little bit bitter. But the nice thing about a microplane grater is that it really is only going to grate the outside portion of the skin. This is looking great, and it's smelling really wonderful. So almost done with that. And then you can save the lemon to maybe put on top of the salmon when it's done, or to do something else with it. So if you just pound it a little bit onto your bowl, you're gonna see the rest of the lemon zest just comes right out into the bowl. Okay, and then we're gonna mix that up a little bit. And we're gonna add some olive oil. So just a few tablespoons of olive oil, really to taste. You just wanna coat all of the breadcrumbs and make sure that they are evenly coated with the olive oil, because this is what's going to go on top of our salmon. Needs a little bit more. Again, you can't mess this recipe up. It's so easy. And your family and your guests will love this recipe. This is by far our favorite salmon recipe, and what we're going to be eating tonight. Okay, so this is ready. So we're going to set this aside while I show you how to prepare the salmon, which again, another really easy recipe. Okay, we've made the topping, and now we're ready to prep the salmon. So this is about 2 pounds of salmon, and there's 5 people in my family, so I cut it into 5 fairly equal portions. And we are going to top this with a little salt and pepper, some Dijon mustard, and the topping will be the very end, the panko topping. The Dijon mustard is used to help the panko topping adhere, and it also offers a really nice flavor, and it does not taste mustardy at all. So don't hesitate in using the Dijon mustard in a lot of your different savory recipes. It really lends a really nice flavor to cooked meats. Okay, so the first thing that I do with the salmon is I add some salt and pepper to it. So I'm showing you exactly how I would do it at home. I'm not varying this at all. I have my salt in a little salt cellar, and this is kosher salt, and I'll sprinkle each fillet with a little bit of salt. And then we're going to use some Dijon mustard, and what I like about this particular Dijon mustard is that it has a spout. Whoops! That's okay. So we are going to just put some Dijon, splurt it onto it, just like that. Really easy. And then you're going to take the back of a spoon and just spread it onto each fillet, just like this. And I want to make sure that I get the mustard on all edges of the salmon, because I want to make sure that the panko topping adheres really nicely onto it. Okay, so that's it with that. And then we're going to take the panko topping, and we are going to add it on top like this. So I like to add like a spoonful onto each one first, and just kind of tap it down, make sure that it's sticking well, and then go back and kind of fill in the spots, just so I make sure that I evenly distribute the panko topping onto each slice or each fillet, and I'm not left with not enough topping. So go back. So really easy, just use your hands and just lightly press the topping onto the surface of the fillet. And as I'm doing this, I'm smelling the beautiful lemon zest, and I smell the olive oil in here. It's really, really delicious. Very, very nice. So this just takes a few minutes. I mean, this is such an easy recipe that really comes together really in about 15-20 minutes. It's really, really simple, and it looks so elegant as well. And that's it. Look how beautiful this looks. And we're going to put this in a preheated oven for about 425, and it's only going to cook for 15 minutes. So literally I put it into the oven, I set my timer for 15 minutes, and I walk away. 15 minutes is really all that it takes to cook through, and have the salmon cook through. And if you just want to make sure, you just take a fork or a knife and just put it straight through, and if it goes in without any resistance, the salmon is completely cooked. If you feel some resistance, set it for another minute. Every oven, of course, is a little bit different, but the 15 minutes is the golden amount of time that I use for my oven. So we're going to put this in just a few minutes, but I wanted to show you how we make the broccoli. So broccoli and any kind of vegetable is really, really nice roasted, and they can roast at the same time because the temperature for roasted vegetables is about 400 to 425, and you'll get a really nice char. So the purpose of roasting vegetables at a higher temperature is you want to make sure that you're trying to caramelize the vegetables. So you don't want a lower temperature because all vegetables have a lot of water. If you have a lower temperature, the water from the vegetables will start to seep out, and instead of browning, it's going to boil, and you don't want that. You want to try to caramelize the tops of the vegetables at a higher heat. So you want to prevent, or you want to actually evaporate the water that's going to be coming out of these vegetables the minute that it hits the heat. So, and another tip on roasting vegetables is make sure that you have them in a shallow pan like this, and that you have them spread out and not clumped together, because again, vegetables have a lot of water, and if you have too many vegetables crowding your pan, they're just going to boil in their own water, and you're not going to get a roasted vegetable. So if you need to separate your roasted vegetables into two pans, go ahead and do so. So I'm roasting broccoli today, but you can add different vegetables to this too, ones that are going to cook at the same temperature and the same amount of time as broccoli. So vegetables that come to mind to me are cauliflower with this. You can do tomatoes with this, and the tomatoes will the grape tomatoes will just kind of melt and make a really nice sauce. You can add a little bit of garlic, like whole garlic cloves would be nice. Brussels sprouts would be wonderful halved, especially in the fall and in the winter when Brussels sprouts are in season. And then in the summertime, you can do roasted summer vegetables. So any vegetable that grows together can be cooked together. So in the summer, you want to think of things like zucchini squash, eggplants, green beans, all of those kinds of vegetables, tomatoes, all of those would be wonderful roasted. So today we're only going to use the broccoli. So it's very simple preparation. All you need is olive oil, salt, and pepper. And if you wanted to use any kind of herbs, you can. If you have any herbs in your garden, some oregano, you have some basil, those are things that you can add at the very end, because fresh herbs will kind of lose their flavor in such high heat cooking. But if you have any dried spices that you like maybe a dried Italian spice blend, you can add that. But I find the simplest preparation for roasted vegetables is just salt, pepper, and olive oil. Really, really easy. So let's get the olive oil and spread a little bit on there, and then we're just gonna mix all this together. And then we're going to use a little bit of salt. And I just take my fingers and spread the salt onto that. And then we're going to use some pepper. just gonna mix it all up. Make sure that each broccoli piece is covered by the olive oil. And if you need to add a little bit of extra, you can at this point. You can also, if you want, you can put this into a large bowl and you can mix all of the olive oil and the ingredients in the bowl and then add them to this pan. Okay, so this looks good. We're just gonna spread it out and we are going to add the salmon and the broccoli together into the oven and set the timer for 15 minutes. The broccoli may take a little bit longer, we'll see. We want to make sure that we get some browning in certain spots of the broccoli and then that it's tender enough. Okay, so let's get that in. Okay, set your timer for 15 minutes. Okay, and then meet me at the stove and I will show you how to make the couscous with toasted pine nuts next. So while these are cooking, we'll be making the couscous and everything will be done at the same time. Okay, so thanks for joining me at my oven. So these are the ingredients for the couscous with the toasted pine nuts. Again, one of our favorite dishes to serve with the roasted salmon and the panko topped salmon. So what we're gonna start off with is a few tablespoons of butter. We have a chopped onion. We have about a cup of couscous. We have some chicken broth. You can use water too if you don't want to use chicken broth. We have some chopped parsley. And at the end, we're going to add some toasted pine nuts. So toasted pine nuts are really easy, and these are optional too. They add a really nice crunch and a really nice flavor to the couscous. And all I did is I put it on my smallest burner of my oven, and I set it to medium. And I sat there until they started to toast. So what I would do is I would shake them as they were toasting to make sure that we're toasting each side of the pine nut. So after that is finished, it just takes about a minute and you have to really watch it because they burn very, very quickly. I found that this is the easiest way to toast nuts is to do it on your burner instead of doing it in the stove because I always forget when they're in the stove. So I always do them I toast them in on my burner, on the smallest burner. So that we're gonna put that at the very end along with the chopped parsley. This is the couscous I'm using today. I've used a lot of different types of couscouses and they all pretty much taste the same. And these are pine nuts and they come in a jar or in a bag. You can find them at any grocery store as well. I'm using chicken stock. You can also use chicken broth. It turns out the same in terms of flavor. And I like to use chicken broth or chicken stock that has the lowest amount of sodium because I want to be able to control the amount of sodium that I add into my dishes, and I don't like to start off with a lot of salt. I like to build up to the salt level that I like. So I always recommend that people purchase no salt added tomatoes, no salt added or lower sodium broths because then you can add the salt that you'd like to add. Okay, so we're gonna start with the butter. We're gonna heat that up. And again, it's just 2 tablespoons of butter. If you don't want to use butter, you don't have to. You can use any kind of oil. I would use olive oil because that's just what I'm used to using, but you can use any kind of oil that you would like. So we're gonna let this melt. And then we're gonna add the onion. So I used white onion. You can use red onion as well. It will give a little bit of a pink hue you'll see the onions will turn pink after they're cooked, and that's okay too. I like red onion in terms of its sweetness. I think it really goes well with a cold couscous salad, but I do prefer how white onion looks in this particular dish. And this is just a basic yellow onion. You can use a white onion, white fleshed onion as well. It doesn't matter which variety of onions you use in this. You can even use shallots if you really wanted to. And just wait for this to kind of melt down a little bit, and then we'll saute the onions. I like adding onions to this recipe. It adds a little bit of a sweetness to the recipe and just a little bit more flavor. I think anytime onions or garlic are added to foods, you get that underlying sweetness that's really, really nice. And especially in grains like pilafs and couscous. So we're gonna let this saute for a little bit. So what you're looking for when you're sauteing onions is, right now the onions are opaque, but as they start to cook, the onions are gonna start to turn translucent and soften. So you want to do that slowly. You don't want to start off with a high heat because you don't want the onions to burn. When I have a gas oven and when I'm sauteing anything, whether it's onions or garlic or whatever it may be, I'm always increasing and decreasing my heat depending on what I'm seeing that is happening in the pan. And I want you to do that as well, and just get a feel for how your oven works. And always make sure that you're increasing and decreasing the heat. If you notice that it's burning a little too fast, decrease it. If it's not doing much, increase it. And even throughout the cooking process, I find that I do that often. So as vegetables start to cook in heat and in fat, they'll start to release a lot of the water that's already in the vegetable, and that's what you want to see. And that eventually is going to evaporate, and you're going to start the caramelization process, and that is what's going to bring a lot of the flavor into your food. So you want to do this slowly, don't rush it. I've found that anytime I rush cooking a recipe, the flavor is just not that good. Cook with love and you'll see that your food will always taste good. So this is looking really, really nice. And then after this is done, we are going to add the chicken broth, a little bit of salt and pepper, and we're going to add the couscous, and then turn off the fire completely. What I really, really love about couscous is that it is so easy. You just bring up your liquid to a boil, you throw the couscous in, turn off the fire, put the lid on, and set your timer for about 15 minutes, and the couscous is ready to go. So this is a really nice, elegant side that you can make for company, but also just as delicious for a weeknight. And couscous is another versatile grain because you can also make it into cold salads, and you can play around with what you add to it. Today we're going to add pine nuts and parsley, but you can add chopped tomatoes. Sometimes I'll have grape tomatoes. I'll add some Italian parsley, some feta cheese. I've made this into a cold salad, a curry salad, where I'll add curry powder to it, and chopped fruit and chopped nuts, chopped red pepper, and I'll have that as a cold salad, and that's always really popular with a little bit of a lime vinaigrette. So couscous is a really, really versatile grain that is really delicious, hot or cold. So I'm noticing now that the onion is starting to lightly, ever so slightly brown, and I just turned down the heat just a little bit because I don't want it to burn. And I'm also noticing that the onion is also starting to soften and become translucent, and that's what we want to see. And you want to try to cook this a little bit slower for one more reason, is couscous is not a very slow cooking grain. It'll cook so quickly. You don't want to have crunchy onions in your finished dish, so you want to try to give them some time to really soften nicely in the oil or in the butter that you've added. And again, like I said, I added butter, but you can add olive oil as your fat. You can add water as your liquid ingredient, and just add a little bit of extra salt in it to make sure that it's seasoned properly. This particular chicken broth has some salt in it already, so I'm not going to add a whole lot extra. So this is looking really nice. So I am going to add the broth right now, and it is about 1.5 cups of broth. And this is going to come to a boil, and then we're going to add the couscous and turn it off. We're going to add a little bit of salt to it and a few grinds of black pepper. Add as much as you want. Turn up the heat a little bit to get it to start boiling. Okay, so this is up to a really nice boil. Just turned off the heat. You can turn it off right before as well. It doesn't really matter. We're gonna give it one quick stir, put the lid on, and this is completely done. Once this fluffs up, we're going to add the toasted pine nuts and the parsley. We're gonna use a fork to fluff it up. Okay, so about 5 minutes have passed by. And because we only use 1 cup of couscous in this recipe, we don't really need a full 10 to 15 minutes. If you were doubling or tripling the recipe, I would let this steam for about 10 minutes, maybe up to 15. But because this was just 1 cup, I let it steam for about 5 minutes. Perfect timing. My salmon and my roasted broccoli are done. And let me show you what this looks like when we take off the top. Beautiful couscous. You see the onions float to the top, and all we're going to do is we're just going to take a fork and we're just going to gently fluff the couscous just like this and incorporate the onions in there and the salt and pepper and everything. This looks wonderful. So you want to use a gentle motion. You don't want to use a spoon in this because you don't want to smush the couscous. You really want to try to fluff them. And you see that it has absorbed all of the chicken broth beautifully. It looks really nice. And now we're going to add the toasted pine nuts and the parsley. We're going to mix this all up. Look how beautiful this looks. So nice for company and such a nice weeknight dinner as well. My kids love couscous. It's one of their favorite grains. So this is all done. So meet me at the island so I can show you how to plate. Our easy salmon, broccoli, and couscous family favorite dinner is done. Let me show you what this looks like. The salmon was roasted beautifully in the oven for just 15 minutes at 425 degrees. The broccoli was roasted alongside it, and you see that it has started to brown in spots, and that's what you want to see. You don't see any water, any liquid in here. You just see just residual amounts of oil, which is what you also want to see. And if you notice, I've also included the stems of the broccoli. Don't throw those away. Many times at grocery stores, you'll see broccoli sold with the stems. I love the stems of broccoli. They contain so much flavor. What I'll do is I will cut those off and I will peel them with a sharp knife and then chop them up and use them in either roasted broccoli, or if I make broccoli soup, the stems of the broccoli will serve as my base of my broccoli soup. So don't throw those away. Those are still really edible and really delicious. And then my couscous was fluffed nicely at the stove, so we have that here. So let me show you what it looks like when we plate. So we are going to just take off one piece of the salmon really easily. And what's nice about this is that when you use your spatula to get your salmon off of your pan, the skin sticks to it, and then you don't have to worry about the skin. Although the skin is edible as well. We'll add a little bit of broccoli. And then a little bit of couscous. And your meal is completely done. So let's talk a little bit about the nutrition that's in this plate. So we have the salmon, and salmon is a great source of protein and a really good source of omega-3 fatty acids, which most people know. But did you also know that salmon is also a really good source of B vitamins and potassium? So that's one little nutrition fact that a lot of people don't know. And we have the broccoli that is rich in fiber and vitamin C and also B vitamins, and it's one of the few vegetables that has a really good source of protein as well. And then your couscous is a carbohydrate, and that balances everything in this dish. There aren't any carbohydrates in your salmon, very little carbohydrates in your broccoli, and the couscous balances this plate nicely. It looks like a My Plate, which we'll be talking about at the food pantry in August. So you also see that the colors of the plate are also really appealing. I always tell my students and students that come to our cooking classes to make sure that the food that they put on their plate is colorful, because we eat with our eyes first and then with our taste buds. So make sure when you're planning your menus, you're thinking about the different colors that are going to be on the plate and if they look good together. You don't want to have an all brown plate or an all green plate. It looks good if you have different colors put together. So this is my family's favorite seafood dinner. Panko topped salmon with roasted broccoli and couscous with toasted pine nuts. I hope that you'll try the recipe. We'll have the recipe available for you online and on the social media post. Join me for our next edition of my family's favorite recipes. See you next time. Thank you.